We're on the Samachay Amid Aleph. We're just going to start Abaya again because we're talking about under what how does the lender return the ribbis that he's collected. Amar Abaya, Haimand Masik Zuzi de Ribisa Bechavre. This person who he was owed ribbis, he took ribbis from his friend. Shimon lent money to Ruvain, and he lent it with ribbis, and he got the ribbis. Ka'azli chiti abo geruya bezuza. And at the time that the ribbis was to be paid from Ruvain to Shimon, it cost you would get 4 measures of wheat for a zuz, beshuka, in the market. V'yav leiu chamisha, and Ruvain paid him, instead of giving him 4 measures of wheat, he gave him 5. Ki mafkina mine, when we take away from Shimon this ribbis that he received, arba mafkina mine. Abaya says he only has to pay back 4. Idach uzuli hu dekam machal gabe, moizel gabe. That's just that Ruvain decided to give him extra wheat because he's paying him back wheat. Now he's not paying cash, so he said, "I'll be nice and I'll give him an extra." That part is not ribbis. That's just basically a gift. Rava says no. He has to give back all 5. The mikar b'teres ribsa asay liyada. It was all part of the ribbis. So he gave him the ribbis in the form of wheat, and he gave him extra. So it was all part of the ribbis. Same case, he owed 4 zuzim of ribbis. And Reuven, instead of paying cash interest, he gave him a coat. So the way we look at it is that Reuven owed him, $10, and instead of giving $10, he said, "I'm going to use the $10 and buy a coat for you." When we go to seize, when Bezdin goes to seize the ribbis from Shimon, he has to pay back the ribbis. You take from him 5 zuzim. But you don't have a right to take back the glima. The glima is if he was bought by Reuven, by Shimon, I mean. So all Shimon has to do is pay the value of the ribbis. He doesn't have to pay the actual coat that he got. Rava says no. Glima mafkinimine. You do take away the coat. My time lemru glima de michse v'koi glima de ravisi. You shouldn't say that this glima that this person is walking around with is a coat that he got from ribbis. It's not appropriate. I don't know exactly what this issue is that we're worried about. Like we say that children have a chiyuv to return something that was stolen in their hands. Now it's something Bezdin is sort of stepping into the role of making sure that the person shouldn't be mavaz himself by walking about something that people identify as interest.
How much is this coat worth? 4 zuzim, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I don't think it's a question of a different amount of. Yeah, it doesn't say anything about the amount. So probably 4. Amarava. Haiman de Masik traces Zuzi de Rabisa v'chavre. Someone who Ruvain owed Shimon 12 zuzim of ribbis. V'agale chotzer, and Ruvain, rather than paying the interest, gave to Shimon his chotzer to use, the misgara ba'asara, that normally is rented for 10. And he gave it to him, and Shimon was mekabel it instead of the 12 that he was owed by Ruvain of interest. Ki mafkina minei tresa mafkina minei. When we take so Shimon lived in Ruvain's apartment in the place of 12 zuzim that he owed him. So now Shimon has to return the ribbis that he got. Even though the apartment was only worth 10 for a month, let's say, you still take from Shimon 12 zuzim. So you could say that Shimon could say, why are you coming to take from me 12? I accepted this apartment in place of the 12 zuzim of ribbis that I was entitled to, because I said to myself, listen, ribbis is all bonus. I really shouldn't be getting ribbis. I'm really not sleeping so well at night because of my ribbis. So I'm not going to squeeze him to get the last two. It's all extra anyway, so I'm not going to squeeze him for it. So therefore, I was masking to take it for 10. But now you want to tell me that I didn't even get the benefit of 12 zuz. I only got something worth 10. Now you're going to tell me I have to pay him back 12 for something that I took in the place of 12? It's not really worth
No,
12.
this 12 is on top of the 12 that he has to give back, I'm assuming.
No, that is the 12 he has to give back.
No, I'm saying he's not.
Reuven, Shimon,
Reuven paid Shimon 12 zuzim of
no, he
ribbis,
didn't.
right?
He didn't pay him 12. He paid him, the payment was in the form of allowing him to stay in Reuven's apartment. That was how we paid him the 12 he owed.
He owes him back the 12.
What?
So in other words, he's saying, so the question is, should he pay him back 10 or 12?
Right, that's the Gemara's question. Now, when Shimon has to pay, Shimon's actually taking cash out of his hand for something that he only got an apartment, and the apartment was only worth 10. So he's saying, listen, I valued it at 12 for purposes, since it was taking the place of ribbis, which I wasn't entitled to anyway. It was all profit.
Right.
Don't now make me pay back 12. So tomorrow, no. Hashta the lawyer mistarshli could argue kulyama hu de agran. Says, but now that I'm not even getting that benefit of I'm having to pay it back. I just want it to be the value that everyone gives it, which is 10, and all I should have to pay him back is 10. So the Gemara, no, mishum da amalei savata v'kabalta. No, it's too late. You already accepted that this apartment rental is in the place of 12. So you accepted that it's 12, and now you have to pay back a full 12. So the mission. Marbin halaschar. You can, like we'll see, you could add on to the value of rental. Marvin alamecha, but you can't pay additional when you buy something. Ketzat, what does that mean? Hiskelo is chatzeri. Shimon rented to Reuven a chatzer. And he said to Reuven, if you're going to pay me now, if you're going to give me an advance payment for this rental, I rent out this apartment for $100 a month. If you give it to me now at the beginning of the month, or let's say at the beginning of the year, you're going to pay me for the whole year. So the whole year really should be $1,200. But if you give it to me now, I'll give it to you for 10 slayim for the shana, which is, 10 times 100, 1,000. But if you're going to pay me at the end of each month, sell l'chodesh, sell l'chodesh, and if you're going to pay it at the end of each month, you have to give me a seller for each chodesh, which would come out to 1,200. So essentially, he's offering him to pay less if he advances the money. So it sounds like the real amount is 1,200. So why is he if the real amount is the 1,000 that he's saying now, and he's just gonna charge him more for not giving him the money? So the answer it's mutter. The Gemara is going to explain, because normally the real amount is the amount at the end of each month. It means normally a schirus is paid for at the end of a month. So therefore, if the 1,200 is the real amount, if he advances him money earlier, he gives him a discount. That's not a ribbis. That's a discount for giving money early. However, if Shimon sold Reuven a property, a sada, and he says, if you pay me the money now, I'll give it to you for 1,000. And if you wait till the end of the year, when you get the harvest, and you'll have money to pay, then you have to pay 1,200 usr. Then it's usr, because he's essentially saying, even though you're really supposed to pay for it now, if you if you want to pay for it later, I'm essentially lending you the money, the $1,000 plus a $200 interest payment. So that is going to be us. Gemara explains what's the difference between schirus and buying. Why, when you rent, you can make a higher rent if you pay later, and it's not called ribis, and by a sale it is. Like we said, when we learned the Mishnah, that schirus you pay for at the end. That's the typical setup. Even though we have it slightly different, you pay each month at the beginning of the month, but the way they did it, after you enjoyed the property for a month, that's when you paid. Since the time has not come for him to pay, meaning at the beginning of the year, he's saying, pay for me for a whole year for 1,000, which is saving him 200. It's not payment, it's not profit for waiting to be paid. Really, this is the value. The value is taka to pay 1,200, 100 at the end of each month. It's a discount that he's giving him rather than asking him to pay more for keeping the money. That's by schirus. Seifa, even the zvininu, by the seifa, which is talking about a sale of a property. Obviously, when you buy something, there's no at the end of the sale. It's all happening in one time. So the money is supposed to go right away. Reuven has to pay for the property immediately. If he says, if you pay me in a year, you could pay me less. You could pay me, instead of paying me 1,200, you could pay 1,000. The other way around. Sorry. If you pay me in a year, you have to pay 1,200 instead of 1,000 now. It's getting extra for the privilege of holding on to the money for Asr. Amar Rava says, Rabbanan looked into this question. They found a pasuk that supports this, that a sachir, a rental, is paid for at the end. The Torah calls it schir shana b'shana, kasach shana b'shana, like a rental of a year to another year. So it's coming to tell you that you pay for each rental, the rental of each year, you pay in the following year. Meaning at the end of the rental, that's when you pay for the past year's rental. The same thing for each month. So we said in the second part of the Mishnah, we're talking about a sale. We said if someone sells a property, a sada, and he says, if you pay me right now, you only have to pay 1,000. But if you pay me in 12 months, then you have to pay 1,200. We said that's also because it's agar noter. He's essentially charging him $200 for the right to hold on to his $1,000 for the year. So that's what the Mishnah said. Or Amr Rav Nachman, Tarsha Shari. Rav Nachman says a Tarsha is mutter. So Rashi explains there's a bunch of Tarshas here. So we're going to have 3 different Tarshas. The first Tarsha is about, a third of the way down from the bottom. Tarsha Shari. Limkar Schaira Bahamtana Biyoser Midameh. To sell inventory, and where you're going to wait to pay for it for more than what it's worth. He says that's allowed. He said it's okay. They say I'm selling widgets, and all the seller says is you can buy this for $100 and you have to pay it within 6 months. We said that's not, even though it could be he would sell widgets for less, he'd sell them for $80, and he's charging them $100 for 6 months from now. It's not considered rip. So well, I'll explain why. What about our Mishnah? It says when you buy a field and you say it's a higher price if you give me the money later, that is ribbis. So why are we saying by these widgets, this harsha, that it is allowed? In the case of our Mishnah, it's talking about we explicitly said if you pay it now, it's 1,000. If you pay it at the end of the year, it's 1,200. Hasam hachaloi katzle. However, in our case, meaning by the Harsha of Rav Nachman, all he said was that if you pay at the end, it's going to be 100 or 1,200. But he didn't explicate that if you pay it earlier, it's going to be less. So that's not considered to be ribbis. And again, we always have to keep in mind that whenever we're talking about a sale, it's always ribbis to Rabbanan. So we say the Rabbanan were not geyser in a case where he didn't say specifically that if you pay earlier, it's going to be less. That's the first tarsha. Amar Papa, tarsha didi shari. Papa said, my tarsha is mutter. What's tarsha didi? So let's see Rashi. Tarsha didi shari. This is the next tarsha. He would make, Rapapa made beer from dates. He would sell it, they were cheaper earlier in the year, in Tishrei, but the price went up in Nisan. And he said he would sell it to people who wanted, the store owners who wanted to have some date beer on their hands. Let's say a barrel cost $50 in Tishrei and $100 in Nisan. So he would sell it to them in Tishrei, and he'd say, listen, I'm going to charge you the Nisan price, but you have to first pay me in Nisan. He said that's mutter. Even though they're paying more for something that's currently worth less, because they're waiting to pay later. Zakt Gemara, my time, but why is that allowed? Scharoi le'pasid. Scharoi le'pasid. Rav Papa said, if I would just leave the beer in my warehouses, nothing would happen to it. I could just wait till Nisan and sell it then. Zuzi le'tzarichnen. He's a very wealthy man. He said, I don't need the money. It's not that I'm dying for the money. So as far as I'm concerned, I would just leave it in my warehouse and sell it then. I know who the kavidna milsa. I'm doing you a favor. By the buyers, he says. So he said, what are you telling me this is ribbis? I'm doing them a favor. They want to have sheikhar now. They don't want to wait to buy Nisan. They want to sell it, be able to sell it. They want to already have it in their hands that they can go in Nisan and sell it at a higher price. So good, so I'll do them a favor, but why should I have to suffer for doing them a favor? As far as I'm concerned, I would wait till then. Rav Sheshes said back to Rav Papa, my chazi mar the azos basadidach. So he said to him, you're saying this is not ribbis because you're looking at it from your perspective. From your perspective, you have no need to sell this, and you could wait till it's worth more, so therefore you're taking more. Zil basa they do, but however, look at it from the point of view of the people who are purchasing it from you. If they would have money, why are they doing this? Why are they willing to pay the higher price now? Because they don't have cash. So if they would have cash, have a shak l'kihashta, they would go buy according to the current price. The reason why they're going to your papa is because you're willing to extend them credit. So from their perspective, it is a loan. Hashta the less luzuzi shlak l'kiyukadul. Now, since they don't have money, they're paying the amount of later. So that means that they're basically paying interest to you. From their perspective, they're paying interest in order to get the loan. So therefore, it should be us. That is the second tarsha. The third tarsha is the most complicated one. Amar of Karsha, tarsha didi vadi shari. Let's see Rav Cham's tarsha, Rashi. Amar of Chama tarsha didi vadi shari. Moicha prakmatya. He would sell widgets. Moicha b'makam hazoil. Ksharshu nimka b'makam hayoker. Rav Chama was in New York, and in New York, buying umbrellas an umbrella cost $1, but in Chicago they're worth $2. So he would sell them in New York. He would give it to a shliach, or he would sell it to someone for the $2 that it's worth in Chicago. So moicher b'makam hazal, he would sell it in the place where it was cheap. Kashashu moicher b'makam hayoker, at the price of the place where it's expensive. Umamtim lahen, and he would wait for them. They would the people who he sold it to would bring it to the place where it was expensive. And Rav Chama was responsible if something happened on the way from New York to Chicago with these umbrellas. And these purchasers, what were they getting out of this? They were buying it at the same price that they were going to sell it in Chicago. So what were they getting out of it? That they would then get money. They would buy it from Rav Chama. They didn't hand over any money. And the money that they would get in return for these umbrellas, they would keep for themselves in the meantime. So they would go buy in Chicago more. They would buy some stuff there, Mevi'in Lekan, and then they would bring it here to sell. They would bring it back to New York to sell. So that second phase of using the money that they got for selling the umbrellas that they hadn't yet paid for, Rav Chama had extended them credit to buy these umbrellas. That's where the possible ribis is. When they go back, then the achrayus is on the shluchim. Since these purchasers are not achroy for the prakmatya that they got from Mechama until they arrive at the place where they're selling it for a more expensive price, that's not called a halva. Hashem prakmatya don't care until they sell it. They mekabel and then they get the money. But what's the problem? The problem is that they're not really gaining it. What are they getting out of this? These people are schlepping his stuff there for the price that it's sold for in Chicago, and they're going to pay him back that same price. So what are they doing it for? The reason they're doing it is that after it's sold, they get the use of the money until they get back to New York to Rav Chama. And what are they giving in exchange? They're giving that they were acted as his employees to sell his stuff for him. So that's the issue of potential ribis, at that they're providing service in return for him giving them credit, or actually giving them the property, these umbrellas that they're going to sell, and the money they'll get from the sale, they're going to be able to use until they get back to it. So he says, Chama says, Tashdi Vade Shari. It's certainly Shari. My timer. Why is it? Nichalahu deleka b'shuti. It's worth it for them, Adarabah. They're gaining just from the fact that they're coming as my agent, as my shliach. Since they were coming from Chama, who was a grosser Talmud Chacham, they were exempt from any taxes, any meches. And also, when they came to sell anything, they basically didn't let anyone else compete with them because they were representatives of Chama. So their payment was not the fact that they got his money, but rather it was inherently beneficial for them to do this, to take his stuff for them. So that was not a benefit that they provided to him in exchange for him lending them the money. He lent them the money. But for them, it would be worth it for them to do this shlichus just for the ancillary benefits that they get, that they're treated with more respect, that they get off on the mechas and whatever business they're doing, and that they get the first rights to sell in the marketplace. So there's no benefit of their service being provided back to Rav Chama for him letting them use his money, because that was not really a benefit to them, to him, because he could always find people to be a shluchim. They want to be a shliach because they got treated better in the marketplace. The halachas of Rav Chama, the halachas like Rav Chama, like we just said, that this type of parsha is mutter. The halachas of Rav Elazar, the halachas like Rav Elazar, that we said that we take away, if someone pays ribis katsutza, ribis deraisa, we take it away from the lender. The halachas of Rav Yani don't mamali heinu mali demand. And the halachas like Rabbi Yana, who says that it makes no difference when a seller makes a forward contract, which could be theoretically an issue of ribis. It makes no difference whether he ends up paying the schira with the schira that was supposed to be paid, or if he gives money at the end. Even so, it's going to be treated the same. Zok the Mishnah. Machaloyas Asada. Someone sold, Reuven sold Shimon Asada. The Natzonle mixes damen. And Reuven gave Shimon a down payment. The property was worth 100, and he gave him $50. But Amalai, and Shimon said to Reuven, whenever you want, you can pay the other 50, and then you can take the field. Awesome. It's awesome. As we're going to explain, I don't know, does the Gemara explain it? Not really. Yeah, so the Gemara doesn't explain it, so we'll explain it. The problem over here is Memanav Shach, you have a ribbis problem. If, in the meantime, this property, he sold the property to Reuven. Reuven sold the property. I don't remember how I said it. Let's say Reuven sold the property to Shimon, and Shimon now is holding on to it. And Shimon gave Reuven a down payment of 50 for this property worth 100. So who's going to be eating this Paris in the meantime? It's two possibilities, either Reuven or Shimon. So if Reuven, who's the seller, eats it, and then it ends up that the property is sold, that Shimon provides the other 50. So now that means that this whole time, Reuven was eating the Paris. He was eating Paris that on a property that wasn't his, because it was really sold to Shimon from the beginning. So then that Paris blibes a ribbis that Reuven is getting on his loan. And the other way around also we have a problem. If Shimon is the one eating the Paris, if the purchaser is the one eating the Paris, so if it ends up that this deal doesn't work out, Shimon never ends up giving the other 50. And then Reuven has to give back the 50. In the meantime, Shimon has been eating Paris the whole time. The purchaser has been eating the Paris. So if the deal falls apart, then it turns out that Shimon was eating Paris in exchange for letting Reuven hold on to the down payment until the deal fell apart. So either way, whoever's eating the Paris, you have to be chayshish that it's going to cause a problem of ribbis. Hilveyu, but the Mishnah continues. Hilveyu al Sadeyu. If that the first case was talking about where he sold and he gave a down payment. But if let's say Shimon lent Reuven money on his sada, meaning that he lent Reuven money and Reuven gave his sada as collateral to Shimon, and he tells Shimon tells Reuven, if you don't pay me back $100 that you owe for the next 3 years, Harei Shali, then the field becomes mine. Harei Shaloi. That's not a problem. And that's what the Taka did. It means even though, because in this case, this is not a case like where we're talking about a down payment. This is talking about where he owed him money, and this is being held as a mashkin. So we're talking about that he gets it at the end. If he does, it certainly belongs to Reuven the whole time. A mashkin doesn't go out of the ownership of the borrower. So it's not going to be a problem. And the Gemara is going to say what the issue is. We're coming to talk about whether an asmachta is kani. So that's the Gemara. So we're going back to the first thing that we had said, by a mechira, that we said that you can't sell it. Now the Gemara is really talking about a slightly different case, but we'll keep an open mind about how it compares to the Mishnah. Back to the Gemara, mi oichel Paris. In a case like our Mishnahs, where someone sells a property with the down payment, who eats the Paris? Ravuna says that the seller who has only received the down payment but not received the full amount, he eats the Paris until either the deal is consummated, he gets the rest of the money, or until it falls apart. Ranan says no, that you don't it's not the lekeach who gets the Paris, because then you'll certainly have a problem of ribbis. What you do is you put the Paris on the side, and depending on where the deal ends up, if the deal goes through, then it means it belonged to the lekeach from the beginning, and he gets the Paris. If the deal falls apart, then it goes to the Mike. The light pligi. So it's not really a machlekes. Hada Amar, the first case where we said that the Mike gets the Paris, where he said Amalchi Maisis Kni, who he says when you'll give the money, when you'll give the rest of the money, then you'll be kaina. So obviously, if Shimon sold it to Ruvain, and he says the deal is only going to be a deal, and it's only going to be owned by you at the end, it's not me'achshav from now, but he's saying at the end when you give the money, so certainly Shimon is entitled to the Paris beforehand.
It's not a problem that Reuben's holding on to the money until then.
I'm sorry?
It's not a problem that Reuben's holding. Let's say it's not a down payment, right? You pay in installments, and then at the end of installments, you get the chayfa, you get the field.
So you're saying
That's
why
not
isn't
ribbis
the
that you get
problem?
free.
So you're saying why isn't it ribbis if the deal falls apart? And
No, if the deal goes through, Reuben gets free $50 for 6 months until Shimon gives the rest of the payment. If you allow someone to pay in installments, we
I
have
hear
to
what
get
you're
the
saying.
field until the end.
Hada amalem chimaisis kni moicha eichel perish ein hasada knuyeloi elmi kan laba van hashta didei achal. So no, how could it be? No, it's not. Those pairs belong to the seller regardless. So how could the pairs be ribbis? It's on Shimon's field.
No,
So he lent money. Let's say
no,
you're
not
saying
the Paris, the
money.
$50.
What the $50? So let's say you're saying the $50 are treated as a loan from Reuven to Shimon. Reuven is the purchaser, right? And he gave a down payment of $50. So it's a loan, but where's the ribbis on that loan? What's the ribbis?
I thought Reuven sold a field to Shimon.
Okay, so you're doing it the other way around. So let's say Reuven sold the field to Shimon, yeah,
Correct.
and Shimon gave a deposit of $50. But the deal is that until the deal is done, until it goes through, until who does? Shimon gives the rest of the money, then it's no deal, and the field remains Reuven's.
Got it. So I'm asking, Shimon gave Reuven $50 for 2 weeks, for nothing.
Okay, so he lent the money.
That's not a problem.
There has to be ribbis. There has to be some benefit on top of that in order for a loan to be ribbis. That's a loan. That's what every loan is. The down payment is going to be treated as a loan.
Right.
You're getting paranoid about every loan that it's. Yeah. You say as soon as you identify the loan, you think there's yeah. Okay, so if Michael, so that's what we're talking about. So if he says, and that's the case where Rav Huna said Michael Eichel Peres. Rav Anan said Mishalshlin. That's where he said Me'achshav. So that's really the case of our Mishnah, right? Again, I'm sorry, I keep on mixing up who Reuven and Shimon is, but let's say Reuven is the one selling the field to Shimon, and Shimon gave him a $50 down payment, and he said, if I give you the other $50, then it's koni to me from now. So now L'chayri would have the problem that Mishnah said of that Memarav Shach. If it goes through, then it really belonged to Ruvain from the beginning, and therefore if Shimon would be Eichel the Paris, it would be Ribbis. And if it doesn't go through, then it will be Ribbis if Ruvain, if Ruvain is getting the Paris in the meantime, because he's borrowing the down payment. So therefore, he came up with this Eitzah. Rav Anan came up with the Eitzah of where they gave it to an escrow. They put the Paris in the escrow, and we wait to see who's entitled to it. So that way, it can't be Ribbis. We decide afterwards who it really belonged to. So this is really a solution for the problem of the Mishnah. Tanir of Safar. The Beribis Dereir of Chia Pa'am Sheshnei Mutarim, and this Ribbis that we just talked about, where someone is purchasing something with a down payment. Reuven is buying a property from Shimon with a down payment. Pa'amim sheshnei mutarim. Both the times when both of them are mutter. Pa'amim sheshnei asurim. Both times when both of them are asur in the peiros. Pa'amim she'amoicha mutter v'lekeach asur. Pa'amim she'lekeach mutter v'amoicha. All four possibilities. Ani Rava Basrei, and Rava explained this. Pa'amim sheshnei mutarim. There are times when both of them are mutter in the peiros. The amalei kni kashir zuzecha, where the down payment was given that, again, Reuven was buying the property from Shimon, and he gave a down payment. It was $100 property, and he gave him a down payment of $20. And they say, okay, so now you are kinda, the kinyan will happen from now, and you're kinda with this $20, 20% of the property, so you get 20% of the payers. So that's certainly not a problem. They already are currently they're currently partners. When he'll pay the other $80, then he'll buy the rest of it. But in the meantime, he owns 20%. Sometimes they're both also like the case of our Mishnah, where we don't know whether it's in abeyance, whether this kinyan will go through or not. So therefore, we're not sure who is the owner because it's going me'achshav, and therefore, if we give the payers to either one of them, it could be ribbis. So sometimes the meicher Reuven is allowed to take the payers, and Shimon is also the amalei l'chi maises kni. Again, if he says when you give the money, then you'll be kinda. So if the lekeach would get it now, so then it would be that he's getting something from a field that doesn't belong to him, in return for allowing to Shimon to hold on to the down payment. So that would be asur else ribbis, and Shimon would certainly be mutter because in the meantime it still belongs to him. The field belongs to him, so he's not getting anything. There are times when the lekeach will be mutter to it, and the moich will be asur. The amalei kni me'achshav. We say it should be kani from now. And he says, I'm giving you, I want the field to be kani right away from now, from the time of the kinyan. So Reuven, if the deal goes through, it will belong to him. But so then the lekeach is mutter, and the meicher is going to be asur. And in that case, he's saying that the amount of money, the rest of the part that's on top of the deposit, is a loan, a separate loan that now Reuven owes Shimon, but the purchase is not dependent on it. So therefore, the purchase already went through. So Reuven's using the payros is fine. Obviously, if Shimon would get the payros, that would be a very clear. We're talking about Shimon has a halva. He owes money to Shimon, and he's giving Shimon payros along with it. That would clearly be ribbis. So that's the case. That's all the four possibilities. Man Tana Shnei Masur. Who is the Tana who says that we came out like the case of our Mishnah? That's talking about where he says it's kanime achshav, but not where we're turning the balance of the on top of the deposit into a separate halva, but where it depends if we'll pay the rest and it's kani, and if not, not. Who's that man who said that would be also to do? Rav Huna bar Rav Yeshua, the like Rabbi Yehuda, not like Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Sar Echad Ribbis Mutter. This is, if you remember, we said anything that there's two possibilities: the possibility that will end up being ribbis, the possibility it won't. Yehuda says is not ribbis. So over here, this is not ribbis. This is only the Rabbanan Dika ribbis. And if it has two tzadim, there's the one possibility that will end up ribbis, and one possibility it won't. So therefore, it's mutter. So this Mishnah that says it's also cannot be like Rabbi Yehuda. What time did we start? When did we start? How long ago?
9:45.
9:45. Okay. So give me another 5 minutes, okay? Mashkin li loy bias, mashkin loy sada. Reuven borrowed money from Shimon, and he gave his house as a mashkin, or he gave his sada as a mashkin. But Amaloi, and he said to Shimon, I'm sorry, which Shimon said to Reuven. Reuven was the owner of this sada that was given as a mashkin on his loan. So Reuven said to Shimon, my sod is that you're holding on as mashkoinus on my house. Loy timkarim. I'm getting it wrong again.
The
Shimon,
lender.
Shimon, who was
lender.
holding on to it, said to Reuven, these houses that I'm holding onto as a mashkin, loy timkarim ella li b'domim halalu. You can't. I don't want you to sell them underneath me, my mashkin. If you sell them, you have to sell them to me. And he named a price that was above. They said he said, I'm gonna add. Let's say that the property was worth $100, and Reuben had borrowed $50, and he said, I'm gonna add $25 to it, so I'm gonna pay a total of $75 for this $100 field. So he's saying, I'm lending you $100, and I'm sorry, I'm lending you $50, and if you want to sell this mashkin of a field that you're sending, that I'm holding on to, I have the option. You're selling it to me essentially for the loan plus another $25 for $75. For underneath its fair market value. Also, it's also for obvious reasons. He's essentially getting an option to buy a field below market value in return for lending him money. That's clearly ribis. B'shivuyon, but if he said, I'm going to add on another $50, so it's going to be the $100 value. If you want to sell it, you got to sell it to me. Then it's mutter. It's mutter. Man tanma b'dam malo. So who's the mandam who says that if he said you have to sell it for less than its value, it's aser? According to Rabbi Yehuda, this could not be ribis, because again, it's only if Reuven is really stuck and he needs more money, so he has to sell it. So then he has to give Shimon the option for buying it for less. But Reuven has the option; he could just not sell it, and he could pay back the loan and get back his field. So therefore, it's a tzad echad beribis. It has two tzadim. There's two ways out. I mean, there's two possibilities. Since it's two possibilities, it's not muchach that there's going to be muchach that there's going to be ribis. So therefore, it's mutter. And one more shtickle. Machalei bias, machalei soda. If he sold, Reuven sold a field or a house to Shimon. When I'll have money, return them. I want to have an option to buy them back. I can reverse this sale, and I'll have money. I sold them to you for $100. If I get $100, I can buy it back. Awesome. It's awesome. But if the purchaser says, when you'll have money, you can come to me and buy it back, then it's mutter. So the problem with the first case, where the seller has the option to buy it back, then it comes out that essentially this was a loan of the money from the buyer to the seller, and in return, the buyer got the use of the house in the interim. So that would the use of the house would be the ribis for the lending of the money until the seller changes his mind. But the second case is mutter. So we'll see. Mantan, I'm Rav Huna Brei Yeshua, the like Rabbi Yehuda. The Rabbi Yehuda, I'm at Tzarech B'Ribis mutter. That's like again. This couldn't be usher according to Rabbi Yehuda, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's only if he decides to go through with purchasing back the house. Maishna Reisel, Maishna Sefer. Why is the second case good? Why is it not a problem? Amarava Sefer D'Amalei Midaite. The Sefer when the buyer offered that if you ever come up with the money, you could buy it back. That's because he said it. I'm offering it to you, but I'm not committing myself. If I decide later on I don't want to do it, he doesn't have to do it. So since there's no enforcement, it's not an enforceable agreement. Therefore, it's not going to be ribis and it's mutter. Okay, Shkayach will continue. We'll chaz over this last piece because that's the mamshach from this last idea.
Good.
Good night. Good vach. See you tomorrow at 8:30.